He is a master practitioner of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, a certified hypnotherapist, a flight instructor, accomplished pianist. He addresses topics ranging from communication to stress reduction, from confidence to self-esteem. His presentation for tonight is Don't Delay, Get Started Today. Please welcome Phil Mandel.
Can you believe there's only 28 days till tax day? Now, be honest with me. How many of you have still yet to do your taxes? Plenty, huh? Well, let me ask you if this sounds familiar to you. April 10th comes along, and you're kicking yourself going, God, I really should get my taxes done. There's only 5 days left. April 11th comes along, still no taxes. April 12th comes along, still no taxes. April 13th, April 14th, April 15th sneaks up, and what I do is about mid-afternoon on the 15th, I'm scrambling for the form to file an extension so I can have 4 more months to procrastinate, and then I gotta make a mad dash to the post office to get it postmarked on April 15th. Well, let me tell you a little bit about how our brains work. In our brains, we have about 100 billion of these. We have 100 billion extension cords in our brains. Except that our brains are called neurons or nerves. And every neuron has a nucleus and an axon that's real long, and then some dendrites which talk to other neurons. So, here's one neuron, and here's another neuron, and every time we have a thought, like, for example, I want you to just think to yourself, today is Monday, and just notice yourself thinking that, today is Monday. Well, you just had a thought, and you fired off about, 100,000 or 500,000 neurons in your brain just thinking that thought. And what happens is this neuron is close to this neuron, but they don't really connect. There's like a little gap there. Does anybody remember what that gap is called? Synapse. Yeah, it's a synapse. And then so this neuron fires electricity and wants to fire off this neuron, but there's a gap there. So what has to happen to bridge that gap? The electricity can't go, so what happens? Anybody remember? Doc, what happens between the neurons? Chemicals, neurotransmitters. This neuron goes squirt with a little neurotransmitter juice, and this neuron goes, ooh, that tickles. And all of a sudden there's electricity going down this neuron, and so these two guys talk. Well, here's what happens. When you fire off the same sequence over and over and over again many, many times, what happens is these guys actually get closer together, they kind of grow together, and eventually they actually touch and sort of connect. And then what happens is when this neuron fires, this neuron like goes right ahead, and then it doesn't have to waste time with neurotransmitters or anything. So it's like greasing the skids, you know what I mean? The electricity just goes phew. So it's a great way to get habits, ingrained. So if I want to exercise regularly and I happen to do that, then I'm going to have all these neurons firing that say, yeah, go exercise. And if I practice a Chopin etude, then I'm going to get better and better at that. And if I practice procrastinating, whether it's doing my taxes or doing my laundry, I'm going to get better at that too. So, here's what has to happen. Here's another set of neurons. And these guys haven't connected yet. My neurons are all tangled. And so these guys still have a gap, and so there's neurotransmitters that have to happen, right? But this one's all greased. So what I have to do is drive on this highway and not drive on this one. And what happens is these guys start to get closer together, right? The brain gives them nutrition, and pretty soon these guys get connected, the habits that I want, right? And after a while, after a few weeks, the neuroscientists tell us, these guys actually start to come apart. We once thought that this was a permanent connection, but it's not. After about 3 weeks, these start to come apart and atrophy, And these sort of get back to normal, and then it's harder to do, the old behavior than the new one. The new one is now greased, right? Wouldn't that be great? So, you're going, well, Phil, that's great biochemically and neuroscientifically and all that kind of stuff, but like, how's that going to help me change my behavior? That's a good question. I'm glad you asked. Well, here's what I want you to do. First, you might want to write this down, take some notes. If you think about a goal that you set, any goal, whether it's losing weight, exercising more, getting your taxes done, or writing another speech, I want you to think back to the past, to when you first made that goal. And when you first set that goal, you had reasons for doing it. So go back into the past and say, well, why did I set that goal in the first place? What were my reasons? What did I want to accomplish and get out of setting that goal? Because your original reasons for setting that goal, those are your motivation, right? You had something in mind. You said, I'm going to get this done. Whether you did it or not, you had a reason for doing it. Then I want you to float to the future and imagine that you've already accomplished that goal. And notice how good it feels, that sense of accomplishment. You don't have it hanging on you anymore. You don't have to think about doing it or worry about doing it. It's already done. And notice how good it feels knowing that you've already accomplished that goal. Does that make sense? So you kind of go to the past and ask yourself, well, why did I set that goal in the first place? And then you go to the future and you go, oh, it feels so good to have it done. Then you just go back to the present and you think about just getting started. I mean, at this point, all you really got to do is get started, and it's like putting your key in the ignition and cranking up the engine. Now, doing that doesn't get you to your destination, but it sure helps you to get started, doesn't it? So once you get over that hump and get started, I'll bet that you can get just about anything done. So my question for you is, what is it that you've been putting off, delaying, procrastinating? What is it that you really want to get done that you haven't gotten done yet? Put yourself in the past and ask yourself why you set that goal in the first place. Go to the future and imagine how good it'll feel once you get it done. And then come back to the present, put your key in the ignition, and don't delay. Get started today.